Hi there. Welcome into the clock out. I'm super excited to see you all. Hey Blue, welcome in. Today we are talking about exiting toxic jobs and specifically exiting the toxic job search cycle. So I know a lot of y'all will go out here, you'll leave one job, you'll go to a next another toxic job after that, to another toxic job, and then the cycle will continue. So what we're talking about today is how we can fully clock out. In the clock out, we were talking about how we can fully clock out of the toxic job search cycle, right? We're team no more toxic employers, okay? So if you're here, just say hey girl, hey in the comments. I'm super excited to see you all, super excited for our live today. I have lots of great information about, toxic job flags, like what to avoid, what to ask, all of that good stuff. So it's here all ready for you, for us to share. So if you don't know me, my name is Mercedes Swan. I'm the Career Love Coach. I do a live every weekday at 6 p.m. to talk about trending topics that really is on the minds of other Black women, my clients, whatever we've got going on. Hey, B, welcome into the live. Say, hey, girl, hey. Make sure you run up the likes for anyone who's joining. But hey, B, I know you always love sharing the likes. So thank you for being here. So if you don't know, like I said, I'm the Career Love Coach. My goal in this life is to really support the careers and the businesses of Black women by providing a space where we can come out, you can come chat, discuss what we've got going on, hardships, struggles, challenges, whatever that is. So the clock out is designed to allow you to clock out of workplace stress, drama, whatever it is, a toxic workplace, and clock into community with a live stream of other supportive Black women. And it is also meant to be a discussion. It is not meant to be a one-way conversation. So get in here, engage. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome in, and thank you so much for the likes. Before we get started, if you're here, you're new here, you don't know how algorithms work. If you are enjoying this live, if you like this live, make sure you follow, make sure you like it, make sure you leave me some comments. It's absolutely helpful for this live continuing to do well, get in front of more individuals who need this type of support. And I'm super excited for today's topic. Okay, so the first prompt, I always like to start off with a question, okay? So let me know if you've ever left one toxic job and then exited to an environment that was even worse. I know that's like a common thing, so let me know. Have you left a toxic job and pivoted to one that was not better? And I can say, like, I haven't exactly had that experience. I'm going to, of course, talk to you about my experience. But, I feel like that's a common thing when we are really frustrated. We actually end up running from the opportunities. Hey, Nicole, welcome into the live. Good to see you. But yeah, I think what we do is we get super frustrated and we will just hop from toxic job to toxic job without really evaluating what is going on, what is happening, what are the challenges, right? So that's really what I want to talk about today. So ways that you can all avoid that. Nicole said, girl, all the time. I know. Nicole said, all the time. Okay, I was almost going to start singing. That is not the song that I want. Okay, it's fine. If you know what song I was about to sing. If you know. Okay. So for me, I always like to talk about my story, right? Like, yes, I absolutely left one toxic job for another. So I feel like the trend in my career is often that I will start off with a career, a role, something that I'm doing, and I'm like really enjoying it. I'm loving what I do. And then there's kind of like a shift in the organization. There's a shift in like management. There's a shift in something during my course there, and then I no longer enjoy it. And some of that has been shifts that like I intentionally took. So one of them for me in my first role, that was not intentional. The organization was going through some restructures. It kind of led to different leadership dynamics. It ended up like having lots of infighting in between leaders. And that ultimately put like people who were doing the work, whether it was entry level, people in management, really trying to navigate that conflicting, like really toxic, challenging work environment. And it just put us all in the middle of it. It was not fun. And so you can only imagine what that means if you're in human resources doing that. Like, it's rough out there. And so that was my first experience with that. And so I was trying to navigate all of the stressors of that, trying to navigate really being the only Black woman in that office. Also, with men, all men in leadership at the highest level and in the board and everything like that. And it was just really an uphill battle a lot of the times for me to advocate for what I needed to do. So you got to think about the dynamics. I mean, I know I'm speaking to the choir, right? But like the dynamics, not just because you are a Black woman navigating quote unquote white spaces, but also because of the dynamics of like being in human resources and wanting the best for employees, wanting the best for the organization and having to advocate that a lot of the times to your own detriment. So a lot of the times in these toxic environments, I have been putting in work and really supporting employees to my own detriment. And that was typically always my challenge, like working in the workplace. So let me know if you feel like if you are in an environment where if you stop fighting for things, if you stop working towards something, then like that was going to negatively impact other people. Because I feel like as Black women, we really do that a lot. We're more likely to be in, I feel like, fields or careers that are kind of giving back, like people who are in nonprofits or people who are in government organizations or people who are in support roles, like you're supporting customers, you're supporting employees. I feel like that's so, and it puts us in a hard place because we know if we don't kind of fight through that, if we don't we kind of don't do things that we need to help others, like it's going to negatively impact others. Like, okay, and all of the D&I stuff right now, right? Black women in D&I, it's a struggle right now, right? So yeah. In HR, okay, so we get Nicole is a struggle bus. So Nicole said, I know you can't see her on TikTok, but Nicole said in HR during uproar and regime changes is so ghetto. Yeah. I'm not even gonna lie. Like looking at this, like I did not necessarily. So I knew that I was in a space, right, where I wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur. Thank you so much for the likes, B. I appreciate you. So I always knew like I wanted to eventually be a digital nomad, like come out of that space, right? But like I said, I went from HR to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was still doing HR work in that. But honestly, I almost was kind of thinking like maybe I shouldn't do this because I don't know what the economy will look like, come January. I don't know what that'll mean for me. I don't know what that'll mean for like people who are my coaching clients and being able to afford coaching, all of their other kind of things. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. But like also at the same time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that I'm not having to navigate all of the insanity that is doing DEI right now. Like it's really wild out here. So yeah, I'm sure HR is ghetto. I'm sure HR is ghetto, but D&I would be ghetto right now too. Rough. So yeah. And anyway, so when I left that environment, I was like, I don't want to be in that type of environment anymore. I really want to be in a safe, warm, inviting environment. And so I was very intentional and very picky with where I was going. There were some organizations I remember, oh my gosh, HR people will understand this. I was interviewing for an organization. The first time I talked to them, they basically were like, oh, here's the position. This is what you're doing. And then I had just kind of ghosted them. I know I was doing it back because I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I wasn't strongly like excited about the position, but I also just like didn't have it in me to be like, don't talk to me anymore. Like professionally. Like this was like my first job search out of college was this organization. And then when I was moving, this was my first time making a move like in a big girl job. So it was like my first time navigating all of that. It was very weird for me. Not weird for me, but also it's in a small town. So it's likely that the people that you're interviewing with know where you're coming from. Like, so it was just kind of weird having all of those. I wasn't handling it well. I mean, I shouldn't say I was unprofessional, but I just wasn't handling it well. Anyway, thank you for all the likes again. And so I remember there was a couple of other weird things. Anyway, so I'll tell you the other things too. But like all these red flags that I'm noticing, I was like, yeah, I'm glad I listened to those. I'm glad I listened to those. But I had, so I was interviewing with them. I had a phone screen. It was some weird things that they were telling me how they were describing the role. They were talking about like the different changes in the organization, some mergers and acquisitions. And I was like, I don't want to do anything with mergers and acquisitions. And so then after that phone screen, they had reached back out to me for an email for a follow-up call. And I was like, I'm not really sure this is right. Like there's just some signs here, some flags here that I'm not really feeling good about that. So then I never responded to their email. You basically said disrespectful. No, thank you. That is kind of it. Like I was like, something's not right. Something's not right about this. And so then they called me back again. They called, I think they actually called me out of the blue and asked like, would I be able to interview with like whoever I think it was the president of the organization too. So it was like still small, but the administration was small, but I think they just had a lot of like people out there in the world, like field people, or like, frontline people, whatever, however you want to call it. And they called, and so I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll have it," but I'm still, like, on the fence, and so I was, like, really being, like, specific in this interview. I was like, "So when I read the job description, when I first heard about this position was doing this, but now it's doing this." And so I think what happens is when I originally had it, I think it was more of, like, an employee relations role where I was gonna be dealing with, like, employee complaints, like, employees calling in for things, which, like, employee relations wasn't my favorite thing anyway, but, like, just depending on the organization, like, it might have been okay. I was doing a lot more of it than I was now. Hey, Nicole, welcome into the live. And thanks for all the likes, B. And so then, so when I talked to him the first time, it sounded more of like a general business partner role, like where I would be doing all elements of HR. So that was really a flag that like things change in how they describe the role to me between the first time and the second time. And the time that I knew, I was like, So I asked them like, they were trying to hit their Black woman quota. I'm not even sure. Sorry, I know you can't see her message on on TikTok or on YouTube. But Nicole said, "Nah, they're trying to meet their Black woman quota." I'm actually not sure. I'm actually not sure they were trying to meet their Black woman quota, because that was even before I was aware of like all D&I stuff. I'll talk about it in just a minute. And so, yeah, so then I was like, how many HR people work for your organization? How many employees is this role expecting to like fill? And they were like, oh, we're like a team of like 200 or 300 and there's only one HR person. And I was like, and this role would be another HR person. I was like, and are you hiring more people? And they're like, yeah, we intend to hire more people. And I was like, this seems like you are setting me up to be overworked. And also you don't know what you want, which means I could be going into that opportunity being underpaid because you're going to ask me to do a lot of other things. And it's too many employees. So I'm going to be overworked. I was already in an environment where I was completely overworked. So like, these were all of the signs that I was hearing that I was like, oh, wanting you to be the cleaning crew. Okay, so I think it was actually, okay, got it. They were trying to meet their Black woman quota and they wanted me to be the yes, they do like to try and send in Black women to clean up stuff. But I think it was actually employee relations first, and then they changed it to more, it wasn't an HR business partner role that I had applied to. I think it was like an HR specialist or something at the time. But they switched it over. So even though it was going to be a hot mess, and I was probably going to be cleaning up stuff had I continued on, down that line, but it was just too many flags and it was too many inconsistencies for me to want to continue in that opportunity. I had another one also at the same time. This is the same job search, right? So I'm just telling you that like your girl has always been picky. Hey, don't mind me. Welcome to the live. But yeah, your girl has always been a little, a little bit like, oh, that's not right. Because it's like, why would I go from one toxic job to another toxic job? Like, that's what we're going to talk about. But like the other one, I had interviewed with them and then I didn't hear back from them at all for like a while. And then I had reached back out to apply because I was like, I don't really know if I'm interested. And then I had reached out to somebody online that I thought, I was pretty sure like they were backfilling her position. Like she was in my graduate program. And so I had reached out to her and she was like, oh, here are all the things about the role. So I was like, okay, I'll reach back out to follow up on my application. Well, after I followed up, they invited me for an interview. And I always think that's kind of a thing, right? Because I feel like organizations are very likely to be very fast with their ideal client. So a lot of the times if you're reaching back out and then they kind of reach out, it could be that they had kind of moved on and didn't really consider you, or they're just not paying attention to their application process or you. Like, then that's another sign too. I'm just saying, you got to listen to things. So I went to the interview anyway. And I don't know if I was rejected. I have to assume that I was rejected because I don't remember, or maybe I just never heard back from them. Like when people are like, oh my gosh, ghosting is this new crazy thing. I was like, no, ghosting has always been a thing. It's probably worse now because we have to apply for many more positions than we typically would have before. But like ghosting is absolutely still a thing. So anyway, so I had gone to the interview and I had a great first interview with the hiring manager. And then afterwards I went to like another meeting with leadership. And I told you I was in this small town and they just started asking me like a lot of like very specific details about the organization that I was working with and everything else. And I was like, I'm an HR person, right? Like, I'm an HR person, right? Like, not only can I not tell you these things, but like, you should know better about not asking me these things because I'm an HR person. Like, I'm not going to tell you the details of whatever the organization is doing in terms of like how they're like there were mergers and acquisitions going on. So like that is not public information. Like I'm not going to tell you that. Like it was public that there were mergers and acquisitions, right? Because it was in the industry. But anyway, so all of that to be said, like those were all of the signs that I was listening to. I ended up moving to another organization. I had a great supervisor that I really loved, that really supported my growth and development. And then I went into an organization. And so then after that, my supervisor ended up leaving. And then I was an opportunity to be promoted. And then I restarted the toxic job search cycle because I did not have a good time with my current supervisor at the time. And so those are all of those things. So in that move from an individual contributor into a supervisor, there were a lot of things that I had questions about. There were a lot of flags that I saw about like leadership decisions, behaviors, how things were done. This was particularly in COVID. And so I think I gave some grace to that of like, oh, well, this might not have just been, a leadership style or an issue with toxic leadership or a toxic organization. It was probably just more likely that we were having all of these issues during like COVID or whatever, right? So yeah, so we can always try and, sometimes some of us try and ignore situations that we see. So you were hearing me like really call out all of these flags. And then the second time you were hearing me kind of like co-sign some of these flags. We should not ever co-sign those flags. If we have anything that feels like a flag, we should always ask more about it. And if we can't confirm it, it probably means that there's more there. And so this is kind of the basis of our entire life today. Like if you are hearing even small little things that kind of say to you, I'm not really sure this is a safe environment. I'm not really sure this sounds right to me. There's a switch up, there's a change, something isn't right. Okay. That is probably because you are making a decision that you should not be in your job search. And you can tell the difference between me when I was really thinking, I was really listening, I was reading between the lines, I was paying attention to behavior and how that led me to a better environment versus when I wasn't. There's lots of different stories and things that I could tell you as I go through different experiences in my career. But ultimately, I think that's where I'll stop for today. I could go on and on about things. But as you're listening, thank you so much for 1,000 likes on TikTok. Y'all are the best. You are the best. I appreciate you. If you're watching this and you're enjoying this, make sure you follow. Make sure you share this. Make sure you like this, whatever. It really helps for the live stream to get pushed out to more individuals. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. So first, what we're going to start off is recognizing the patterns of a toxic job search cycle. So of course, there are always things that are individual to us in our toxic job search cycle. And there are things that are just happening out there in the market. And we cannot always we can't prepare for everything. We can't avoid everything. So I'm not saying that if you do this, it's just automatically going to always be the best job or the best opportunity, right? There are some things that, maybe they're just very, I don't want to say good at lying to candidates, but right. Maybe there's things that they don't know, right? Especially as Black women, when we're interviewing with people who are not other Black people, sometimes they don't see that, or maybe they're okay with their current situation and they're not willing to change the status quo, right? We know what that looks like to work with other Black people who are kind of have anti-Black, say that for what it is. Or are your ally, your mentors in the workplace, right? So that absolutely happens. Anyway, all of this to be said, it's not going to make it all okay all of a sudden, but I'm sharing with you things for you to think about so that you can make better decisions in your career and stop your toxic job search cycle. Okay, so let's get into it. Drink break. Also, if anytime you all have any questions, let me know. Okay, so the first one, patterns of the toxic job search cycle. So patterns that I see, some of these are patterns that I've seen in myself. Some are their patterns that I've seen in clients or people that I've interacted with as a coach. Sorry, excuse me. But what I would say is the first one is running. So I mentioned that you're running away from a toxic job or a toxic opportunity, and then you're not really just evaluating it, right? You're just trying to get from one place to another because you're in a bad place. I say all of that to say that there were a lot of opportunities for me in my last job search where I was depressed. I had anxiety, where I could have made the decision to just exit to any job, exit to whatever opportunity was going to come up next because I desperately wanted to get out of that situation. And I feel like a lot of us will make career decisions based out of a mindset of desperation. And that is the number one sign that you are not going to the right next place, right? Because that means if you're desperate, you're not considering, you're not evaluating, you're not looking at logic, you're not making sure that you're making the best decision, you're not evaluating all of the people, like you're just running, and likely you're running to another toxic job. Like, I'm just putting that out there because the reason the behaviors that you had that led you to this position is probably the same behaviors because you were running and didn't evaluate that are the same behaviors that's going to get you to the next one. Do you feel me? We have to start thinking about what decisions is driving our behavior. Or excuse me, what our thoughts and our mindset and what we're seeing, what we're doing, and how that's driving us in this toxic job search cycle. I hope that helps. The other thing is settling. So I can't tell you how many people will be like, oh, I'm just trying to get this job so that I can get out of this job. I'm just going to do this for right now. I'm just going to stay here for right now. It's okay. This is a good enough job for me. They're going to pay me enough. It's going to be, some semblance of what I really want. And what that really is telling yourself that you can settle. Like, oh, I could kind of be okay with that. Like, no, let's have a different energy about what we want. Like, this is what I want. This is what would help me be most fulfilled. This is what would help me to be most in alignment with my life. Settling is what ultimately we settle. We don't settle for dream jobs, right? Like that's an oxymoron. Like those two things don't exist, right? We settle for a job that's less than what we want and what we deserve, right? And so a lot of times people are like, well, I'll just get to the next opportunity that will take me out of this one. So I'll settle for something that's a little bit better. And often we're not settling for something that's a little bit better. We're settling for the same thing. It's also, I'm going to tell you how many people I've worked with, and I warn them when they work with me, when they tell me, hey, I just want to find a drop, a bridge position. Hey, Drizzy, welcome into the live. Oh, Queen Drizzy, what a cute name. Welcome. When they say, oh, I'm just going to like get a placeholder, a bridge job, a stepping stone job, almost like 100% of the time, I've not seen anybody not do this, okay? They get the job and then they get complacent or they get comfortable and they stay there because you just went through this job search. You don't want to do it again. And I'm telling you, y'all do that. Please stop doing that. Like, y'all can come fight me if you want to. Y'all do that. And so my advice for you is to never take an in between job or just for now job, unless it's something where you're like, you are unemployed. It's unstable. I'm talking about the people that will just like apply and accept anything just to get away from where they are when they already have an opportunity. That will keep you stuck when they know it's not really what they want. Okay. Please don't do that. The other thing is making decisions out of limiting beliefs, right? So a lot of the times, if we're in a toxic work environment, we're led to believe that we're not as talented or as good as we're not good at what we do, right? And so then we make decisions based on that limiting belief, right? So if we had a supervisor that never affirmed us, never said that we were valued, never said that we were good at what we do, then we believe those things because we've never been told our value. And for me, like I've been in environments where it's more neutral, or it's not necessarily about me. It's more like toxic environment, not like a toxic working relationship where I was totally fine. Like I knew my skills, I knew my abilities. It was fine. When I was in an environment where I had a supervisor who constantly second guessed me, who kind of like didn't defend me, didn't compliment my work, always had something critical or negative to say about the things that I did. Those are the times when I was like, am I really that talented? Like, am I really professionally that girl? And so those limiting beliefs will have you thinking that you can't have the position that you really want. It will shut you off from that opportunity of even being able to consider it, right? And in that case, I was in a position where I was like, I don't know, am I that talented in diversity, equity, inclusion? Do I really know these things? And like the answer is absolutely yes. Like I was able to successfully pivot. I was able to do D&I things, like do D&I work in my last role. But the reality is that I had to do a lot of mindset work to help me feel comfortable with that. And that's why I teach mindset work the way that I do with my clients. about having empowering what if thoughts, because that was my experience. That was what helped me get out of my own way to feel confident again in my skills and my ability. So those limiting beliefs will absolutely keep you moving from one toxic job to another, because you don't think that you're really capable of having the job that you want. Okay. This one is kind of a reflection of all of the other things I've already said, but essentially you don't reflect. Like, you just go from one job to another. You just accept the job, you apply, you go through the same cycle, and then you don't really ask a question of like, how did I get here, or what went wrong in this process of looking for a better job, right? So you do need to spend time thinking about it. If you're just launching a job search, it's not going to be good. And the last one that I mentioned, I'm not going to go into it again because I already talked about it, but we ignore those red flags. We see things, hey, Tammy, welcome to the live. We see things that we know aren't working for us, and then we just we ignore them because we're like, oh, we explain it away. We think it's not really that bad. And it really, if you are hearing a flag in the interview or in a job description, I promise you it's 10 times best, right? Because people are on their best behavior. Thanks for liking the live feed. People are really on their best behavior when you're interviewing them. They are on your best behavior when in writing a job description, when you're visiting their office, right? So if that's their best behavior and you can already see some things ain't quite right, you know what I'm saying? It ain't right. Okay. The next one is identifying some of those red flags. So I talked about some of the red flags that I saw when I was interviewing, but here are some of the ones. So just to be clear, y'all might want to write these down. So the job or the organization is poorly structured. So if you read a job description and you're like, this doesn't make sense what this person is doing, it's probably not you. It's probably because they don't know what that person is doing. Too many people were writing that job description. You had somebody come in and tell the recruiter to write something that doesn't make sense, and the recruiter was like, that doesn't make sense. And now you have this weird conglomeration of a job description that doesn't make sense. I'm saying that, like, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. Okay, so like, notice those things, listen to them, and like really read into them, because your goal is to take that to the next thing that we're talking about, is like how to screen, right? If you have also things where you're like showing up to your interview and you're like, this doesn't make sense how these two teams are working together, or how I'll be working with these two teams. Like, if you see something where you're like, oh, you have, reporting to multiple people, or you have two teams in a part of your interview process that doesn't really make sense. Like, why would I be interviewing with this person, not this person? That is a sign of like things are disorganized in the organization. It likely means that they have a hard time making decisions. It means that they don't take time to truly work on like their workplace culture. They don't take time to make sure their organization is appropriately structured. And that typically has issues or challenges for you, like, oh, down the line. Yeah. Okay. Inconsistencies. I talked to you about like how I was interviewing and the position kind of changed. Like, yeah, if there's inconsistencies with what people are telling you about a position, if the recruitment process is unorganized, like they telling you like, oh, you're going to do this and then you're going to do that and then you're doing this, and people are like not scheduling your interviews. If you see things that, like, I remember there was this one organization and they were in education, and I was like their website is so outdated, and like some of these things aren't making sense, and like their recruitment process was very strange to me on top of all of that. And so I just didn't have an enjoyable time in that process. And so I would say, when you organize outside, what they're unorganized on the inside, right? Not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise. Okay, listen. The other thing is that in an interview, like, you should vibe with the people that you're interviewing with, right? Because if like, people always say like, oh, well, I never get through an interview because the people on the other side, they're so stoic. They look like they don't like me. I can't really vibe with them during the interview, so it just went bad. It's like, okay, so there's probably not your people, right? Those are probably not your people. So don't get worried about how you performed in that interview, because it's not your people. You want to really be relaxed and show up, and you want to be comfortable with the other person that you're interacting with, right? That's probably a good sign that that's how they operate internally. You feel me? So it's not just what you're experiencing in that interview. It's not like an isolated event. It's indicative of everything to come next, right? So just honestly believe believe that those things happen, okay? Believe that that is really that's really their culture, right? And so if you're not vibing with them, it's probably not somewhere you want to work, because you want to work with people who enjoy you and are kind to you and show up and have the right energy. Now, this is for me, right? I'm pretty bubbly. I'm pretty I'm pretty outgoing. I'm a little pretty optimistic, like at work, like I want to build connections. If you're not that person, then it's like, of course you don't want to go with everybody's bubbly, right? And I'm not saying everybody has to be that, but I think there's a level of professional courtesy or kindness that you can see in an interview that kind of tells a different story. The other thing is that they're not clear. So if you ask them questions and they don't really know, like if you say, oh, what are next steps? They don't really know. You ask them, okay, what is expected in the first, week of this person or the first 90 days of this person? They don't really know. That's an issue. I would say the only time that that's not an issue is when they are hiring a leader and they're very transparent and saying, we're wanting this leader to come in and do a thing, right? This is not for some entry level positions where they don't know what they're expecting you to do. Like if they're expecting you for not a leadership position to come in and do things, that is problematic. You hear me? That is so problematic. Okay. Okay. The last thing is admitting an issue. So sometimes like you'll get into an interview and they'll be like, oh, well, we have a really big problem with this, or we have a problem with this, or maybe they downplay it. They're like, oh, we have a problem with this, but we're working on this, right? Right, because they're telling you things that they probably don't think would really scare you. And then they're admitting the issue to you. So you probably think, oh, well, it's not that bad. They're transparent, they're open. But a lot of the times it's like, it just means acceptance. It just means that it is what it is, right? And so if that is an issue that's really going to be like a core value for you, that's going to be an issue, right? That's going to be a problem. Oh, okay, Nicole, I want to hear more about this. So Nicole said I had great interview process for my current job, but got there, woo child, they toxic and so many red flags. So I want to know though, Nicole, like, were there really no, I'm not saying that it's your fault, like you know, but I'm also saying like sometimes again, we kind of don't look at some of these red flags that we see. And I'm not putting your business out in the street about some of them that maybe I was clocking. So go ahead and call yourself out. I want to hear. And I don't mean that, like, again, that the interview process is always indicative. Sometimes it's some other things that we're noticing as well. Okay. And I will tell you, if you don't clock in, Nicole, I'll tell you the one that I clocked. I'll tell you the one I clocked. All right. Okay. The last one is funding or future opportunities. So this is not always indicative of it being like a toxic job, but it's also something that you should probably be asking, particularly in this state, like our current political environment. And so what I would say is like, you want to make sure that you have some understanding of stability of your job, right? So if you're going into a job that's contract, but then they don't have like a very specific okay, Nicole. Okay, coming back to that. There's always signs. There's always signs. We just don't see them, but there's always signs. Okay, I'm coming back, Nicole. Let me finish this up. So if, for instance, it's a contract role and you're only interested in because they said that, oh, well, we hire so many XYZ people into full-time roles, you absolutely want to have a better understanding and say like, okay, well, what is that requirement? Is it guaranteed if I hit these requirements that I will be, made a full-time person, or is it more like open, right? And I know it feels potentially like a good option to take a contract role again in this environment, if you're trying to move, get more money, those types of other things. But I also feel like so much is in flux, just with our current current administration. And so I would just say that I think making decisions on moving from a contract to a full-time role right now are just a lot less likely. If you're looking for an organization right now that receives any grant funds, I would stay away from those. Some government organizations that receive federal funding, be careful about that right now, okay? And then also in this moment, like I would never be looking to work with an organization that have recently done layoffs, okay? Like, or has a history of layoffs. Now, there's some organizations in this climate that have done a layoff for the first time, but those are some of my things. Okay, so on YouTube, Nicole says, now looking back, they did list their issues in the interview, but spun it as a growth opportunity. Yes, so they will be like, oh, yeah, we have these things, but we're working on it. We're doing these things, right? It's like, no, sometimes they're really not trying to change them. They're just trying to let you know, like, what's going on. And the growth opportunity is like, are you going to grow through this? I'm sorry, Nicole. Yeah. Okay, so I know Nicole. So Nicole's on YouTube talking about, yes, please share all the things you clocked from the current job situation. So Nicole was relocating, right? I'm working with Nicole. Nicole really needed to relocate. So I was like, I got it. I understand. And that's the part about like the settling opportunity, because a lot of times the settling is what's leading you to that opportunity, right? But again, a lot of times we say, oh, well, this is just a temporary thing. This is just for the move. But then we end up staying there longer for a plethora of reasons. And then we never end up actually leaving for the role that we want just because we already have the job, right? There's a lot of fire put under us when we don't have the job. You know what I'm saying? So in this case, I feel like one of the things that I was clocking earlier on, now, of course, I didn't hear that about the interview, but I feel like the pay range, the fact that in this case, you had to take a pay cut for this. And then when you were kind of negotiating, working with them, they were not willing to kind of see that experience or expertise. I feel like is indicative of an organization that undervalues people, right? Because an organization that's underpaying people, especially where you're living in a more affluent area, that's a sign for me if they're underpaying people. That's the thing that I heard. But I know you need to move. So I was like, okay, I understand. But that's the thing that I clocked. Okay. So B said, and be careful of these temporary contract roles. They will work you to the bone for peanuts and no salary. Yes. Depending on how the contract is structured, right? Like, are they contracting you? Yeah, they did play in your face with the pay. That was my red flag for you mostly. Nicole said they played in my face big time about the pay. Yeah, if they play in your face big time about the pay, that's a sign. That's a sign. And it's not just about the pay, right? Because if you value people, if you value your expertise, you want them to show up as their best selves, you are going to want to pay them to show up as their best selves. People cannot show up for their best selves unless they're paid accordingly. And particularly, I think about that from a living wage in general, but even people who are skilled and who are not being paid and they're asking a lot of them, it ain't it. It ain't it. It's always a sign. It's always a sign to me. Okay. By the way, I always get this thing, right? Like, there are organizations that because of the market, sorry, I shouldn't say because of the market. I should say because of their sector, right? Like, government organizations aren't going to pay as much. Education isn't going to pay as much. What is it? Nonprofits aren't going to pay as much because it's funding, right? I don't mean that there are really like actual constraints to that. Now, Nicole has me dying over here. I promise I'm coming back. Hey, Veronica, welcome into the live. Now bad because they're getting what they paid for. Now, see, that's not what we want, right? We want to be like, I'm well paid for what I do so I can show up fully and do my job, right? Yeah. Okay. We don't want to have resentment about the pay. Maybe that'll be my next thing. I think I talked a little bit about salary. I talked about getting paid. I did it in combination with a lot of other things. Okay. So B said, and be careful of those temp contract roles. They will work you to the bone for peanuts and like no salary. Yeah. So the challenge a lot of times for contract is like, how is it based? Like, are you contracted to complete a project or a task, or you like contracted, but it's like still a set hours? And sometimes I feel like there are some contract opportunities. I'm not even gonna lie. I've seen some of them where, you get paid for this amount of hours and like it's a kind of a bulk pay, but you don't even work all of those hours. And like I've seen some really nice contract work roles like that. But sometimes when it's temp, they kind of just see you as temp, like they see you as dispensable. And so they don't value that. And they're like, oh, well, we paid you for this assignment. So then they don't really leverage that appropriately. So if you are truly a contractor where you are a business and you are contracting to people, like you have a lot of leeway in what contracts you choose to take or not to take. But essentially, like, I would think about that too. So all of that, all of this signed up for a temp position and my boss quit. Ended up doing the leadership work with the same rate. Oh no, they would have had to hear from me. I'm sorry. I know it's not always easy said than done if you feel like your job is at stake. But they would have had to make me an interim. Even if it was temp, they would have had to make me an interim something. That's crazy. Oh, sorry. I don't read it out loud for everybody. But B said, signed up for a temp position. Then my boss quit, signed up for doing leadership work for doing the same rate. Good Lord. I hope you're out of there. I hope you're out of there, B. That's wild. Whew. Okay. So here's how to screen. Here's how to screen. And the rule from this, hey, Shane. The rule from this is I need y'all to really listen, right? We don't listen. We will see it. We won't listen. We'll think it's okay. It'll be fine. It won't be that bad. Like, yes, it will. Yes, it will be that bad. So here, hi, thanks for the likes, for the hearts. So how to screen. So this is what I'm talking about, a read between the lines, right? If somebody says, oh, we have these issues, but it's growth opportunities. The read between the line is we're going to expect you to fill that. We're expect you to grow and to do the fixing of all the issues that we have. That's what I read between the lines. When I went to that organization, they were super messy about trying to be in the other person's my other organization's business. It was like either one, you aren't actually interviewing me, you're just interviewing me to kind of get the local tea. Because why is somebody leaving this organization? You wanted to be in this other organization's business. The other thing is that maybe that's how your culture is, right? Like, okay, you're messy, you gossip, you're expecting the HR person to be the snitch, like to talk badly about employees. Maybe that's the culture that the leadership team. Now, I didn't pick that job. I have no idea. There was another organization where I had interviewed with them, and I had said, what are you doing for DE&I? And that person said, oh, well, I'm really trying to only hire the most qualified person, which meant he thought that DE&I was hiring the not most qualified person. So a person of color couldn't possibly be the most qualified person. Right. What does that say? You have bias that you have not addressed or talked about at all. This was the leader of that organization. There are always signs and things that we hear. And sometimes we don't ask them, hey, GT, welcome to the live. There are things that we don't ask, we don't see, we don't want to read into. So this is the other thing about reading into the line. Sometimes we see the line. We could choose to read into them because we see that something's off, but we justify it instead. So it could be like, oh, well, that organization, it really wasn't because they were being messy. It wasn't because they were being nosy. They just wanted to make sure that, the next HR person was going to have a better understanding of mergers and acquisitions. So that's why they wanted to know what was going on. Like, I could have justified that. Oh, well, it was because, I told you about that thing when I justified it, right? I was like, oh, or rationalize it, whatever you want to call it. Oh, well, it wasn't really that bad. The organization was just because of COVID. It wasn't really poor leadership decisions. It was just because, everybody was making poor leadership decisions. And it's like, oh, no, there's always, you can still be having rash decisions and still center the people and communication in that, right? Like, communication is a key to that, of what made that feel like a rushed, poorly organized decision, right? Which was also indicative of other poorly structured decisions and poorly communicated decisions. That was indicative of all of my experience after that, right? So we have to listen to those things. If we aren't sure, we're not sure if we're like rationalizing things, we have to start to ask questions, right? So if I was working for an organization, and I'm talking about some of the types of toxic jobs if I get there, because your girl is talking a lot. But like in that role for DE&I, right, they had diversity, equity, inclusion on their website as something that was important. The people that I talked to in human resources were all people of color. Now, I talked about how Black women, we often pick opportunities. I'm not saying that's where we get stuck, but just because of who we are as Black women, we want to support. And so all of the people of color, the Black woman in leadership was in HR. There were no other people of color in leadership. So that's an assigned to me. I like to ask the questions. And that's why I ended up asking every single white male in that interview process, what is your commitment to D&I? And none of them had really good responses. There was somebody that was very transparent, is that I don't think we're doing enough. I think that's something I need to learn more about. But again, for you to have a D&I statement on your website, for you to have women of color in your support roles, but not in leadership, like those are things I have to ask questions about. So we shouldn't just see them. We should ask questions about them and really like interrogate and inspect what's going on. And that can mean everything from the pay to the organization to how the leadership team structures to how the organization, like how they do things, everything, anything that could possibly be a red flag. And if they're not really clear with you, if it doesn't quite make sense, okay, there you go. The next one is to do a site visit. So one of the things for me is like people will be like, oh, well, I don't really know if I could ask. I don't really know if I can ask for that. I don't know if I should do that. That just might be too much. And like my whole point is like, if you ask for something in the interview and they decide not to hire you based on that, excuse me, sorry. What are they going to do when you're in the position and you ask for the resources that you need? You ask for the support, you ask for the coaching, you ask for the training, you ask for the resources, you ask for the leadership support. What are they going to do? They're not going to give it to you. So if I ask you a question and that offends you enough for you to not want to hire me, so be it. Bye. Goodbye. And I'm not talking, and like, I really always want to get this clear. I am not talking about making a career decision based on you need to pay your bills for stability. I'm talking about like real, I'm in a place where I am in a good career, or maybe I'm in a toxic job, but it's well paying, it's stable. I mean, making a like exit to another organization for better. I don't mean like getting to safety. Okay. Like these are the things that I'm just not going to deal with. The other thing is analyze all documents. So everything that they're sharing with you, telling you whatever, whether it's, the job description, emails that they're sending, like analyze everything that they send to you. I was having a conversation with a client the other day that felt like, she had accepted an offer that was different from what was actually happening in terms of her benefits and bonuses and pay and expectations around that. Like we have to be really careful about understanding like what are people telling us are things that they would like to do versus like what the actual structure is right now, because we have to make a decision based on the actual structure and what they're actually going to pay us. Looking at the news, like especially if you're at a large organization, or even if you're at a small organization, like in a small town, right? Like I could have maybe looked at the news or done some networking or asked around. I mean, at the time I was an intern, so I was just expecting an internship. Like, but I probably could have found out some things about some people. And that would have helped me make a better decision about like my career trajectory and things like that. And then the last thing is like you can look on their online presence. So one of the things that I like to do is go look on LinkedIn. I like to see who is currently working there, who formerly worked there. Like what are the demographics? What are the makeup? What are they saying online about the organization? Are they posting? Is it all the people of color that are not posting or that they aren't working there? What's the tenure of those people? Have they worked there for a year? Have they worked there for 10 years? Like, what is it? Is there a particular demographic that are staying there for 1 year versus 10 years? Those are the things I'm looking for. The other thing is their reputation, right? Like, do they have a reputation? Like I always joke, right? Like over the unaliving of me, would I work for Amazon? And I'm not even just talking about all the related to D&I stuff. Back years and years and years ago, Amazon has always had this sentiment about how they treat their employees and how they do things, right? So people who were like, oh yeah, I used to work at Amazon, I was like, I am so sorry for that trauma. I am truly sorry. Like, and it's consistent. And like, I know that never having worked for Amazon. So I know that there's a way to figure that out. Like there were case studies about that in business school. Like, okay. So take a look at that reputation. And I already talked about this, but think about layoffs as well. So yeah, do you all have any questions about any of the things that I mentioned, any of the screening tools, whatever? I typically will get questions about like, should I look at Glassdoor? And I say, I feel like Glassdoor is one of those things. Like it's the same thing about like going on Yelp and like all of the reviews are bad. I'm not saying that maybe it is bad, but I'm saying is that people who are pissed off will go there. Right. So, and unless an employer is taking time to like address those or manage them, like you don't really know whether or not that's truly indicative or not. So trying to connect with people who formerly worked there is probably also people of color. Black people who used to work there is probably more beneficial, right? And I've had people respond, okay? Um, okay, so the last thing that I'm going to go through, I'm probably not going to get through everything today, is to talk about the different types of toxic jobs and different things that you can do to kind of evaluate that. So the first one is performative DEI. So you don't know like whether or not they just have a DEI statement, whether people talk about DEI or they're really about that life, whether or not they're really trying to change things, whether they're really committed to it. And so you're going to have to ask questions that talk about metrics, right? Like, what is your retention rate of, Black professionals? What is your promotion rate of Black professionals? What are some of the commitments and the results of some of your D&I initiatives, right? If they aren't comfortable telling you, or they don't know, or it's not transparent some way, there are plenty of organizations that post their metrics online. Yeah. Yeah. So if you can't find it, they're not willing to tell you, then a lot of times they're probably not actually doing the work. Another thing is promotions. Like, one of the things for me is growth, right? Like, I don't want to be stuck in a position for too long. So I would ask questions like, how many people have been promoted that work for you? How are you developing employees? What programs are there? How many employees move from like individual contributor roles into management roles each year? Tell me a little bit more about that. Now, that one's probably a little bit more specific because a lot of times they don't think about it. But like say, oh yeah, I would love to hear back, some thoughts afterwards. Like, don't let them just, don't let them off the hook. Make sure you know. And again, if they're not willing to answer your questions or put off by your questions, like what will they be put off by when you have to ask them really hard things in the workplace as well? It's all a sign. The underpayers. Sorry, Nicole, the underpayers. You want to ask them things like, what is your raise structure? How do you do bonuses? What is the average, increase that employees receive each year, right? There are employees that will frequently get a pay adjustment, right? It's not that 3-5% each year, right? Which is not keeping us up with inflation, which is not keeping up with cost of living, and is not a lot of times once we come in that organization after a year, we're putting out much more than we would in that first year because we have learned and we grow. And organizations will feel like, oh, well, I paid you to learn here, so I shouldn't be paying you for that skill set. And it's like, no, I earned that skill set by working here. Now you have a more skilled employee, therefore I should be paid more for that, right? I had a really unfortunate situation with that like early on in my career. And so all of that being said, like, yeah, if you have people that just don't think of doing pay adjustments or salary adjustments for learning new skills and new abilities and performing at a higher level, those are toxic environments because they don't promote, they don't value those types of things. The toxic leadership. So you might be in an opportunity where you're actually directing, like you're interacting with a leader that you really like maybe they were in your interview, but like at the end of the day, what's going on up here ultimately trickles down and it causes issues. So you want to get a sense about like the leadership styles, like how do they make decisions? Like how do they set the strategy? All of those things. Like if you can't get a better sense of that before you make a decision, probably they don't make great decisions when it comes to strategy. Okay. Last thing, so I did layoffs. That's a clear one. Like it's unstable. The leadership, like I always feel like a layoff is a sign that leaders aren't making a good decision, right? People might say, oh, well, we need to do this. We didn't account for like, the workforce, blah, blah, blah. I feel like to a certain extent that was understandable during the time of COVID, right? Like a lot of the employers, I can't fault them, right? They can't operate, right? In that case. So like those layoffs really made sense. Today, right now, many, many years after that, unless there's been some real big shift in their industry, like I don't understand it. This was poor planning on your part. And so it tells me that there's issues with your leadership and your management rather than just like something that's happening in the market, right? Unless there truly is something, like there's something disruptive, right? I mean, okay. And the last one is whenever you have like, oh, we're fast paced or we're high volume or we're this, we're that. Those types of issues are always going to be a challenge. Like if they're telling you it's fast paced and that they just need somebody that, can pick up and go and doesn't need any training, those are always really challenging signs because a lot of the times it just means it's like a toxic work environment where it's cutthroat. Nobody will help you. Nobody will support you. And you're just kind of on your own. No. So you want to ask about their culture. And if they have things like fast paced or high volume in that, thing. Unless you're a person that really likes that. I know that there's some people out there. It's not for me. Like, I do actually move really fast, but if you have a fast-paced environment, it's usually an issue. It's not usually that you're really fast-paced. It really means that you have an issue and you're just expecting people to get up and do whatever you need them to do whenever you need them to do it and not have any boundaries around their workload and priorities and other things. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, so my last advice to you before I get off this live, it's of course been really exciting and really good to chat with you all today. I love all of the recognition of the toxicity here. Not that I love that it was an experience, but I love the awareness because I think ultimately it's going to be something that helps you to make better decisions in the future. Hey, Nelly, welcome to the live. But what I want you to do in this next week as a takeaway from this is to please set some job search standards. Oh, thanks for liking the live. Hey, Tamara. Oh, sorry, Tamara. Sorry. I have too many Tamaras in my life and I just say Tamara. Okay, but I do want you to set some job search standards. Thanks for the likes. And so what that means is you're going to look at things like, what do I want to do? What do I want to feel? What do I want to experience? How do I want to be valued? Oh, Tamara. Okay, nice. I love it. Okay. So anyway, I have a group and two of them are called Tamara, but their names are spelled all differently. So all good. Then I'll have to remember a different Tamara. Welcome. I'm about to get off though. But what I would say is like set those standards of what you want to see, how you want to feel, what you want to experience, and like start to write those down. And then you have to be really Nicole. Sorry, I know y'all can't see Nicole over there, but on TikTok. But Nicole said, "Oh, and another flag is we are a family here." You know, that's the flag that everybody talks about. They are, if they say that they're a family, they are not, in fact, a family. The organizations that have truly felt more family-oriented have never actually said that. Family-oriented means you have no boundaries and we're toxic. We're a toxic family. That's right. Okay. Anyway, y'all are going to make me late for some call. But all that being said, like, I want you to write down all of the things that you want to do, you want to see, and you want to experience in your next role. How do you want your leadership to act? How do you want to feel when you show up every day to work? How do you want your position to be, structured so that you have boundaries and you feel good about showing up to work every day? That's what I mean about standards. And a lot of the times those standards will do two things. They will help you to identify when you hear something that is not in alignment with those standards. Okay. Same thing with dating. I always say this, like, sometimes job seeking is like dating, right? I really mean that in that regard. Like, have dating standards, have, job search standards. And then also it's going to enable you to remember to ask questions, right? So if you don't have a conversation with that next supervisor about their leadership style, you go back and you say, have I evaluated all of my standards compared to this? And you're like, oh, I didn't actually ask that supervisor about that. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. Now we're going to go back and we're going to say, thank you so much for this offer. I'm super excited to move forward. I would really love to have just one additional opportunity to ask the hiring manager a couple more questions about their leadership style before I make a decision, right? And again, if they're like, no, you can't do that. Again, that's all you need to know. That's really all you need to know a lot of times. Okay. So all of that being said, I'm going to pop off. It is almost 7:00. I have a call right at 7. This was truly lovely. For those of you who are on TikTok, of course, you can't see the recording, but you can watch it on LinkedIn or YouTube later on. It was really great chatting with you all. As always, if you have any questions after this call, just let me know, reach out, send a message. Leave a comment now or later. And then also, if you haven't had the opportunity to join me for my Black Woman Bliss webinar, my last one is tomorrow. If you want to join, you can go to the link in my profile to sign up. It is a free webinar. And I'm teaching you a lot more about pursuing Black Woman Bliss, leaving toxic jobs, talking about how the toxic job ultimately ends up impacting our long-term ability and our long-term abilities to be successful, like in terms of finances and career success and growth and business growth as well. And the different dynamics in that, as well as how we can begin to shift to have an abundance mindset, which is Black Woman Bliss. Okay. So all these components. So That being said, I hope I see you in the webinar. It's been great chatting with you. Thanks for all of the engagement. Thanks for all of the love. Thanks for running up the likes on TikTok. Thanks for all the comments on YouTube. And I will see you on Thursday. So I am not hosting a clock out stream tomorrow because I will be on the webinar. What is that called? I will be I will be doing the webinar tomorrow, so I will be having the clock out. Not me having a moment, okay? The brain was like, bye. All right, well, it's 7:00. I gotta go. I love you all. I will see you all on Thursday. Bye.